Well, if you've been following my podcast for any period of time, actually now there's over 3 years of podcasts. You've been learning about my recovery and hopefully picking up some pointers and I guess helpful advice about your recovery from problematic porn use. So here's a question. What happens when you have a long period of recovery, even years, and then you slip and fall flat on your face? Now, my last relapse was over a year ago, and before that there was, I think, 5 years, but I still clearly remember what led up to it and how it happened. And I want to talk to you about that today. Hopefully you can learn some things from my story. And again, in a point and place of vulnerability, I think this can be helpful to you, even if you've been, like I say, in a period, maybe you've had an extended period of sobriety. What happens, though, if a relapse happens? So today we're going to share from my experiences as well as some of the experiences of guys that I work with. Welcome aboard.
Ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, before we get into this topic of relapse after a long period of sobriety, let me just say that the Finding Traction course is finally finished. I have been working on this course and redoing it, making it better, improving it, then making it professional for over 4 years now. And on my website, you can purchase it for a discount, actually for the next 3 days up to August 15th. If you're listening to this currently, that's 2024. Also, there's a way for you to get connected to the brand new Circle Recovery Learning site that I have been moving all of my material over to. And that includes all of the free recovery resources, all of my podcasts, information on groups, and all of that is now found on my new Circle Learning platform. I'll also put a link on the show notes here so you can go ahead and sign up. I'm asking guys who sign up to use their initials just because of privacy concerns, if that at all bothers you, which I think is a legitimate thing. So use your initials. And at this point, I'm working with Circle. So it's exciting to see that I can have all of my stuff on the same way. And over time, we're going to have a platform for people to connect with. If you want to find out more about some of the helpful options, and again, I do a monthly community group for guys. We do weekly Finding Traction groups. All of that you can find on the website, which is bandofbrothers.care, or you can contact me directly at bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. Again, I'd love to help you any way that I can. The fall is coming. I was coaching a guy this morning and he said his daughter was back today, first day of school, back at it. And so oftentimes the start of a school year is a chance for us to say, okay, I've got to retool and strengthen some of my recovery. Maybe the summer went well for you, or maybe it had a really spotty track record and you're going, I don't want the fall to look like what the summer looked like. So again, I'd love to hear from you. bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. All right, so let's talk about this idea of relapse after a long period of sobriety. Of course, some of this would apply even after a short period of sobriety, whether that's days, weeks. Obviously the point of reference here is relative. For you, a long period of sobriety might be a month. It might be, 2 months, 6 months. It could be a year. For some guys longer, for other guys shorter. But the principle is the same. How do you deal with the results of going, I cannot believe I ended up in the mud, basically in that situation. So here's a few ideas. Let me just say there's two ditches that I think we have to avoid. The first one is what I call the ditch of catastrophic thinking. A relapse, especially after a period of sobriety, can, something maybe you've been on an extended period of sobriety, perhaps longer than you ever have in a relapse, can feel especially devastating. It's over. I broke my streak. Go to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200 kind of thinking. And in that way, I used to run cross country in high school many years ago when I was in really good shape. And I think I fell or tripped once or twice, but they never had me go back to the very beginning of the journey. They never had me go back to the starting line and says, you've got to start all over again, right? They never disqualified me like, once again, the U.S. men in the 100-meter relay. Okay, now, Vern, you're really pushing it, considering that Canada won that relay. But, okay, I know I've just turned off a whole bunch of you now. But, right, we think I dropped the baton. I've been disqualified. That's not the case, right? And they don't make you go back to the starting line. So that's the thinking that I think we have to avoid. I also get when guys are sharing and they're demoralized. That's a good word, demoralized. One of the things I say to guys is, okay, let's say you've been free from porn for 6 months. Let's just take that number. It could be more, it could be less. And you say, I can't believe that I relapsed after 6 months of sobriety. I felt like for the first time I had some momentum. I had some clear thinking. I was experiencing the fruit of recovery. And now look at what I've done. Well, you can turn that, on its head and say this, you know what? You have learned how to walk free of porn for 6 months. If you've done it once, you can do it again. You can build on that. You can improve on that. You have the skills to do it. You've broken that line of thinking that says, I never could go porn free for any period of time. So I would say build on your successes, in that way. And so it's just a way I think I would turn some of that demoralizing stuff on its head and say, you know what, look at what you have gained. Look at the new confidence that you have simply knowing that you can do that again. So the one ditch is the ditch of being demoralized or catastrophic thinking. The other ditch, I think it's worth saying, is what I'm going to call the ditch of minimizing. Minimizing is like, giving yourself a mulligan in golf and, when nobody's looking, pretending it never happened. That was so yesterday. That was so this morning. I didn't want to think about it. I'm just moving on. I'm forgiven. It's forgotten. Sometimes people get into these spiritual things and yeah, I think we do have to move on, but not at the effect of minimizing it, because minimizing it really stops us from learning and doing the things that are necessary to counteract why we slipped and fell in the first place. So I want to talk about under the idea of what is a helpful approach if we're not being catastrophic or, in one ditch, or we're not minimizing it, pretending it never happened in the other ditch. What are some helpful principles? Well, here's the first one. Refuse to hide. One of my favorite recovery sayings is this: nothing to fear, nothing to hide, nothing to prove, right? Refuse to hide. Tell yourself, you know what? I am loved by the right people. Shame will not have a hold over me. Some of you are going, yeah, but people are looking up to me. I mean, that's obviously the challenge in when you're helping. Let's say you're helping somebody else in recovery. Let's say you're even doing a recovery podcast. I can't imagine who that would be. People need to know I'm success. People need to know I've got this long streak and I never struggle, I never fail. Well, that's all unhealthy thinking. We can be so success obsessed, and I think we can apply that to recovery as well. Some people that, well, if I shared my struggles or my failures, I will, some people might think, well, I can't learn from Vern anymore, or I can't learn from my coach anymore because he's lost his sobriety. That is all unhealthy thinking. And it's what causes people to hide. Well, people are depending on me. You know what? People are depending on you for you to be honest. And even, let me put it this way, people can learn from the way you handle your failures and slips. That's what they're depending on. They're depending on your transparency. And so I would just say that I remember, this is going back a little over a year ago, and I probably shared what had happened probably with 4 or 5 different guys in different groups, because I was determined that I was not going to hide. And I remember my friend Jeff said this to me. He says, you know what? He says, I am learning more from your transparency than your track record. It's showing me how recovery needs to be done. There's a great saying from the old Lutheran guy that I think Hitler killed or put to death, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I think he was a Lutheran pastor in Nazi Germany times, but he wrote this book called Life Together, how to build community, essentially. And he had this amazing saying that said this: when men share their successes, they remain competitors. But when they share their failures, they become friends. And we need to be committed to the belief that people can learn as much from our failures as they can from our successes. So the first proper thing is just refuse to hide. Hiding is what got you into this mess in the first place. Okay, here's the second thing. This may sound a bit funny. Embrace the regret. After, there's a relapse, everyone describes, I liken it to having this still lake. And it's like taking a rock and throwing it into this still lake. And then you have these ripples that come out of the rock being thrown into this lake. And I think anyone who's relapsed that is in recovery feels those ripples spread out over the next, day or days. And then eventually some of those feelings begin to dissipate. And instead of running from those, I would say embrace those. Remind yourself how they feel. This is how I feel. This is what it did to me. I did that podcast about a letter to myself using the theme from the old country guy. I can't remember his name now. You'd have to go, and the idea there was write a letter, maybe even journal about, what? This is the effect this has on me. This is the end result of those brief momentary things of pleasure. It feels like days of regret. And remind yourself of that. So those would be, I guess, some just the helpful thing to say, to embrace that, not to run from that regret. Just to say, you know what? I need to feel these feelings. Here's the next one. Ask yourself the right questions. What was I feeling? What was going on with me? What was the need that I was trying to meet in that situation? In my situation, again, thinking back to last year, I'd had a flu shot. I'd had a COVID shot. I was out here on the deck. My wife was sick upstairs, and I was sitting here and I had open access to a YouTube, and it was just not a good combination of things. And it was like, okay, I was not at my best point. Now I could have taken precautions on that situation, but I'm asking myself, what was going on at that time? Here's another question that I think is really good to ask. How was I grooming myself for the relapse? most of us can look and see little edging patterns, say scrolling through social media reels, for example. And here we go back to hiding. We fail to check them in with guys because after all, they're small, right? We didn't really have a full relapse. We didn't go to our old websites. So it was just light beer, compared to drinking vodka or something, right? It was just, a little bit of light beer, using the alcoholic metaphor here. But what happens is those little edging things, they build and they grow, especially when we're not checking in the small things. And over a period of time, they just lead to their own negative momentum. I'm not even sure. I would probably go out on a limb. My wife says I make up stats all the time. I would say that 95% of relapses are not surprise relapses at all. They're actually ones that we look back, we can see a period where we literally are grooming ourselves for a relapse. Here's another question I think is good to ask. What did I forget? Right? In order to relapse, you have to forget something. You have to forget your big why. Why do I want to walk free of porn? You have to forget perhaps the relationships that you are in and how this is going to affect the relationships around you. Even practically, you have to forget the fact that you're now going to check this in with the people closest to you in your life. In that situation. I would say in my situation, I need to forget the negative reminders that I've set up. I have positive and negative reminders. Some people call them rewards and consequences. But I have to forget, if I act out, then I'm going to put this negative reminder in place. And I have to forget all of that stuff. And so for me to walk in sobriety is to regularly remind myself that these things are in place in my life. And let me just say, I think it's worth asking ourselves. I did the podcast called Last Time, Next Time, to ask yourself, what was the technology? What was the pathway I used in acting out? If that pathway is still open, you're going to use it again. I can pretty much guarantee that. So if you have left open the same pathway that you traveled down before, you might not travel down it for a day or two or a week or two or a month or two, but if you haven't taken steps to remove that easy impulse pathway, you will choose it again at the same time when you have that moment of weakness. And so you literally need to ask yourself that question: what is the weak links in my life that I used and that I now need to close? So all of those things I think can be helpful if you've experienced a relapse. If that relapse came after a short period of time or after it came back after a long period of sobriety. I think many of those principles are really the same. Well, once again, it's good to be back. It's been a good summer so far. September is rapidly approaching. Once again, I love to hear from guys. If you are looking for a group to get into this summer, we walk through 52 weeks of our brand new Finding Traction course. Send me an email. We're going to be starting up groups probably over the next few weeks. So I'm collecting guys for groups in different time zones. My email, once again, is bandofbrothers.care@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Till next time, we'll see you then.